All right. Um, yeah, we are live on YouTube. Okay, good. Cool, 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 cool. So, as you see, my setup looks a little different in my room as of late. I got some serious work to do behind me because that box is full of stuff for work and I need to get that sorted out. So, um, really quick, real fast, since we're all live, we're all here. um, a couple of house rules that we need to talk about. I guess not rules necessarily, but a couple of in-house things. This will probably be the new time for the lives on TikTok. I probably won't be going live on YouTube again. I've already put it in the post. Well, since I already put it in the post. So, okay, just backtrack really quick. Housekeeping. uh, your girl is very busy right now because I took on uh, yet another job because you know, I have my authorship and then I have my real life. So I'm essentially working multiple jobs to finance both my authorship and my daily bills because I am a whole adult. I pay taxes and all that stuff. Anywho, having said that, I'm not sure how long I'll be keeping up with the lives, but if this is the last live, um, is in the chat. Essentially, all the students here are auditing this class. So, with that being said, you can continue taking the class at your own self pace. So, having said that, this will be the last live for this class. So all participation points for lives, everyone up until this point will receive full points for that. But again, everyone is auditing this class, so it's essentially a class that you can take at your own pace. And I will be sure to continue uploading weekly the videos for each class because again, this is week 3 of week 8. So I've already recorded 3 of those videos. So I'm going to go ahead and record the rest of those videos and then I'll just schedule them on YouTube. So you can expect to see each scheduled video. I will drop them on Sundays. So now that that is out, I will go ahead and I will update the website as well to reflect that. So don't worry about attending any lives for the class itself. If that changes by next week, if I hear back from anyone, I will make adjustments. But there has been a huge shift in my work. And so my schedule needs to reflect that. And I figure since everyone is auditing this course and you're taking it at your own pace, then you won't miss the lives essentially because I have the lives in the office hour. So far, there hasn't been any conflict in either of those two things, which is why, again, there won't be any lives here on TikTok or YouTube for that matter, because I like to do both. Um, and so you'll still get the classes. I will still continue chatting with those that stop in on the website. But for now, right now, there won't be any more lives. That's really what I want to stress. This will be the last one. And funny enough, this week we will be talking about clarity. So we talked about your purpose. We talked about coherence and we talked about clarity. And I really wanted to talk about those two things together because there is a difference between the two, clarity and coherence. And I really wanted to make that very clear because it can be a little confusing at first. You think, oh, well, I completely understand. What this means. Oh, this is one and this is there. Nope, they are different. And so that is essentially what we're going to talk about for today. And I also talked about it in the video that's going to drop on Sunday, which is, yeah, tomorrow. So essentially, it comes down to how to proceed. So, how you perceive or how you proceed with your story counts in this regard because clarity and coherence, they're important. Obviously, you need to make sure people understand what you're talking about in your story. Otherwise, it's not going to translate well. But when it comes to clarity, you're talking about making it easy to understand. Like when you're using certain languages, when you're using certain slang, knowing the difference between AAVE and more informal or formal speech, that's important. And knowing your character's voice and who is talking, that needs to be clear. Coherence, you're talking about the entire idea, making sure that everything is connected, like across the board, because if it feels like someone is reading two stories, they probably are. And that typically is something that happens with a lot of new authors, myself included, because you have an idea for a story, and before you know it, when you don't have that clear idea, it could sometimes feel like there are multiple characters where they shouldn't be, and they're talking about things that are not connected. So let me give you an example. We'll talk about um, we'll talk about my first ever series attempt today, because it's been weighing on me, and that's also another reason why I took another job, because I need to pay for things for that. So my first series attempt is called Magic, and it's essentially about five young women in Korea who become part of a gimmick girl group. Okay, Mika, Izzy, An, and Little C, and also Gigi. These five women meet in Korea because of reasons that bring them together, just kismet in that way. And essentially, they make a go at becoming the biggest girl group in Korea. And that's essentially what happens. Spoiler alert. But to get there, they have to go through their individual journeys as well as a group. They have to decide on things and make their staple in the world. And that's not easy, because the odds are stacked against them. You have one fat black girl, one really dark skinned black girl. You have another girl who's not Korean, because I don't want to give the whole story away. And then you have two very shy but diligent Korean women, and they are in this group, and it's not smooth sailings for them, because they're supposed to be a flash in the pan, meant to bring attention to other groups within the record label that they're signed to. That's literally why they were brought together. But you can't deny their talent. And that's what people have to decide again and again. When I started writing that story, it became abundantly clear which characters I loved writing for. And making sure that I stayed the course with that main character story on top of all the other surrounding stories within this series was no easy task. I had clarity. I knew exactly what I wanted these characters to experience. I knew exactly which experiences I wanted to highlight and what to, really focus on. But as far as keeping it coherent throughout the series, making sure that this scene would lead to this scene, that this character and this character would have these moments that would bring them to their final act, was not an easy feat. And I think because I was able to do that, that's why I can't let this series go. um, so when you talk about coherence and you talk about clarity, like clarity, my message, I needed that message of them not being the gimmick group. I needed the message to be clear that they were not your ordinary K-pop girl group. I had to stress that right away within the first book. And I ended that book, honestly, I ended that book really well, in my opinion. I'm tooting my own horn today. um, and so the coherence had to be what I did with the next book, and the next book, and the next book, and the next book, because ideally, this is a 5-book series in my head. I've only published 2, and I've only finished 4 of the books. So the 5th book is the one that I've been working on and off, and it's just it's a challenge, because that was my first series attempt, and to see it struggle the way it has been over the years has been difficult. But again, for clarity and coherence, making sure that the language is there, because again, in my book, they're not just speaking English, but we're not also talking just about the English language. We're talking about um, jargon that's used. We're talking about specific words that are used in Konglish, like Korean and English. We're talking about honorifics. Like those things have to be clear in your story. And if you have to go through one paragraph at a time, one chapter at a time to make sure that you have achieved that, you need to do it. So now that we talked about coherence, about how to organize those thoughts, whether you're working on a series or a standalone or a anthology piece, what have you, make sure that that statement is clear, make sure that everything is organized, make sure you see what you want the big picture to be. Let's really get into clarity. So again, I talked about that just briefly with magic. When you're using language, again, English, Korean, Chinese, Creole, that's all involved in this series. It's a huge undertaking to make sure when I'm using it. Like one of the characters, Izzy, she's Creole. So her parents are Haitian and she grew up in the States. Like she's Haitian American, if you will. And so there are moments where she will use Creole because that's her first language. But when does she use it? Like when will she use Creole? Like that's important. She's not just saying it off the whim sometimes. And then there is Izzy when she gets excited and she wants her foreigner members in the group to know that she's excited, but she can't think of a word in English. Like she can't get the sentence just right because she is Korean. And sometimes when you get excited, you start thinking in your native language and you are thinking a mile a minute. But to be considerate of the other girls in her group, she now has a phrase that she says whenever she can't contain her excitement. And you want to use things like that sparingly because the more you use them, it's almost they lose their meaning. Like think of it like you're cooking and you want to add the right seasoning, the right spices, but if you add all the seasonings all the time, you're not going to end up with something that anybody wants to eat. Okay. If you love ranch, like on your salads or your chicken, like you're not just going to have a bowl of ranch and just throw the chicken and salad in there because that's not appetizing. No one's going to eat that. It's the same thing with your words. You may come across a word that you just absolutely love, like you hear a word or a phrase and it's a new word. And typically, again, I don't want to say this happens a lot with new authors because I've seen veteran authors do it too. You find a word that you're like, oh, that's a good word. Oh, that's really good. Like, let's just say the word is throttled. Oh, and you read a scene and someone say, oh, he throttled our plans and I can't wait to just throttle his throat. Like that was just ridiculous. Now we're in full throttle mode and we don't know what to do. That word, using that word 3 times on one page, it kind of dulls that word. Like you want to savor the word, like you want to use it, like, and you know what I'm talking about when you look back at your stories now, whatever story you're working on, and you find that one word and it's just like it just turns like it scratches like that neuron in your brain. So try to use those words very sparingly. And again, you want to, for clarity, you want to use precise language like that. You really want to get the point across. But if your word becomes a repeat offender, you're just using it again and again, like 2 or 3 times every other page, it weakens that moment that you could have had. So save that word and make the best of it. Again, when you have multiple characters, as I tend to in my series, because again, it's a series, I'm talking about more than one person. You really want to make sure that the sentences are easy to understand. So what I do, or what I did when I started writing magic, and I still do this with all of my writing, like across the board, I start with the most basic sentence structure. Like I'm not trying to give it any fluff right away. And again, this is why you should be doing self edits as well, because you want to go in with the most basic telling of the story to yourself. So in doing that, I use the most simplest words. And I know some people might not be a fan of this. It's a little controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. I like to highlight my basic adjectives and my basic dialogue, like action dialogue, especially because sometimes I probably don't need it. And so that helps me to remember, like, do I really need this? Or could I up it a little bit and use another synonym here to really make that pop or stand out, especially if I'm in a scene that is increasing the action to build to my climax or that peak point of the story. Let's work on it then. But for the most part, I use the most basic sentence structure, because then when I go in to do my first round of self edits, that becomes something that I work on. And so again, when you're telling yourself the story, that is literally the code. That's the coherence. You're telling the story to make sure that it flows and it makes sense. Since we're talking about clarity, this is typically something that I focus mainly on when I do my first round of self edits. And I typically do about 2 to 3 rounds of self edits, depending on how big the story is. So, this spoiler alert, this is pretty much how I focus on that. So, again, when I'm working on the story initially, I do use certain words to kind of help with it not sounding dull. But in my first round of self edits, that's when I look at like technical terms. For instance, when you're talking about an idol group, like who's the maknae, who's the visual, who is the rapper, who's the rapper or the raptress, or certain phrases in Korean, like gumbae, like when you're talking about cheers, or otoke, like when do I use that? Like my first round of self edits for magic, that's when I decided, okay, when am I using Korean? When am I using English? When am I using Creole? When am I using like Chinese expressions? Overall, am I telling the story using the romanticization of Korean language? So, for those that don't know, when you romanticize a word in Korean, it's written in English, but it's the Korean word. Do I decide if I'm going to just write it in Korean, in Hangul, like that whole sentence? Or what is it that I'm choosing to do? Because again, I'm writing a series. It has to be consistent. It has to, that coherence has to be there. For clarity's sake, it has to be there. Um, and so that is what I do when I break down those sentences. I will even highlight certain characters so that way I know, like, okay, make sure to check, like, do I have little c? Is she talking in Chinese or is she talking in Mandarin here? Who is she talking to? What does she sound like? What is she plotting or planning? Mika. She's the wild card, the belter of the group. And she puts this weight on herself because she's not the leader of the group. They haven't really established a leader of the group, but instinctually, everyone turns to her. And she knows that in the group, she is the leader, but the outside world won't recognize her as a leader, but she does it anyway because she's the one that's been making the moves to make sure that the group stays intact. And she's a language learner. She knows Korean. She speaks Korean arguably well. Like she is not she doesn't speak Korean at a conversational level. She's taught in Korean. She's been in Korea since she left the States. She's been in Korea for like almost 2 decades at this point, and she speaks Korean very well. So, with that said, she also knows like Korean customs and language and things like that. So, she can sneak in some bars when she needs to. As far as writing and things like that. And when she does interviews, she goes in like she's this, foreigner, because she is a foreigner in Korea, but she goes in like a first year foreigner where people think that she doesn't know the language, and she does that. That's her weapon, because people forget, because she is Black, they think that she doesn't know Korean as well as she does. And when they find out, they become afraid of her. So she knows Korean. she knows English, she knows Creole, because that, I don't want to give too much away, but Mika and Izzy have a bond, and that bond stems from their childhood. So her Creole is not strong, but she does use it, and it frustrates her when it's not as sharp as she wants it to be, because she needs Izzy to catch up, to understand things that are going on around her, and she doesn't have the time that she needs to make sure that Izzy understands things. And sometimes that comes out in the scenes when I have her using Creole. Like, how do you explain that? How do you express that through another language that is not her first language? And I have to rely on my actions. And that's why clarity is so important, because when you make it clear that that's what's happening, the reader is now, you have to consider your reader, like who essentially is reading this and why. And you have your characters do things that make sense, because if they're not, the reader is going to think, why is she speaking Creole all of a sudden? Isn't she in Korea? Like, they have to be doing this thing for a reason, and you have to make that clear to the reader. Otherwise, it's just going to be a bag of confusion, and no one's going to keep reading your book after. If they're being nice, they're not going to read it after like the third chapter, and they're going to quietly DNF the book. And that is why, like, when you're talking about the point of view of a character, and again, this is why I started week 2 with coherence, because coherence, logically, it makes sense on paper. Clarity, you are making it make sense to the reader. And if you can't do that, you essentially don't have a story. You have people doing things at this point that no one knows why, and no one cares why. So if they don't care why they're doing these things, are they going to continue reading it? They're not going to care. Clarity provides that emotional connection that you want your readers to have. Otherwise, they're not going to read your stories. Okay. So, having said that, that is essentially what clarity provides. And I wanted to go ahead and end on that note, and then also remind you all for week four, where we will be talking about organization, because we talked about why your story needs to make sense. And then organization is going to be how to make your story make sense. And this is going to look different for a lot of different people. And I can't wait for you guys to see that video. So again, quick recap, everyone. This will more than likely be the last live on TikTok or YT. um, so if you don't see any of these, you'll still see the weekly videos, which I will start posting now on Sundays. Like I said, I've already recorded several of those. So you will see them on Sunday. So that way you can still follow along. You can still take the class, since everyone is auditing the class. Right now, the students that I have enrolled, everyone is pretty much watching the videos on their own and commenting on the announcements on the HillmanTok.com's website, which is fine. And it works out with my current work schedule right now. Not to mention, I didn't even mention this in the beginning, but I just signed on to do 4 beta reads this month in June. So that kind of worked out. I'm glad that you all are enjoying this content. Please continue to like and leave comments. Let me know what your thoughts are on clarity now that we talked about it. What of the many things that I talked about, but if you're paying attention, you'll notice that I mentioned 4 key points of clarity in this video. So what one thing will you focus on in your next story when it comes to clarity after watching this live? So let me know, and I look forward to talking with you all soon. All right, everyone. Again, there won't be any more lives for this class, but you can still follow on YouTube. I have a whole YouTube page set up for everyone to follow me there. Leave comments, and if you still want office hour, please let me know. It will probably be around this time, so it'll probably be Saturdays at 9 a.m. Eastern. All right, that is it for now, everyone. Thank you again so much. Bye. Bye, everyone.